Joe, you're stressing me out. It makes me think of therapy. So let's talk about our celebrity here who gets answers from Elon Musk and what is going on.
6 million tweets.
Yeah.
Nice.
6 million tweets. I love Jeff's representation of this so far has been that I got famous on TikTok, and I somehow tweeted out 6 million tweets.
Wow.
6 million views right
Yeah.
now.
Wow.
Nice.
You're going to be getting a
Six.
check from Elon soon. You're like,
He's got 2 chats. Elon directly addressed her twice.
wow.
Yeah, that
He
happened.
knows Chandler exists.
Apparently.
So tell us a story.
So the story goes, I had a very bad experience with a therapist who I'm no longer working with. I was frustrated. I tweeted something out about it, and then it blew up overnight, and I have no idea how or why. But apparently, I started a conversation that resonated with a lot of people. I had some very interesting comments. I got invited onto a couple of podcasts, and then Elon Musk said, wow, which was very exciting.
So what podcast are you going to be on?
I'm going to be on Honey Badger Radio next week.
Oh, nice.
And that's a podcast that they're in Saskatchewan, and they talk about men's rights
Karen,
issues.
Karen, isn't that Karen? I forgot her last name. I think I know who that is. Really, really famous channel from a few years back.
It's an excellent. I follow them on Twitter. And we've been sort of mutually following one another for a while, so that's very exciting. And then I'm going to be going on another podcast called Vent UK that also talks about.
All that stuff's minor. What you're doing something tonight at 8 p.m. that's really going to.
I'm coming on your channel. We're going to talk about a lot of cool stuff. I'm really looking forward to that.
Karen Strawn, I think that's Karen Strawn, right? Honey
I
Badger
believe
Radio?
so. Yes.
Yeah,
I've been in communication. They're a team, so I've been in communication with different members of the team, and that'll be on Monday. I'm looking forward to that.
No, very cool, very cool. She was huge in the MRA community and featured a lot in the Red Pill back in the day. If anybody has ever seen that. Okay, so what went down with your therapist? You're kind of alluding to the story that was the story. So what happened? What was
you want to know the story?
Yeah.
Sure. So I worked with this therapist for 2.5 years. Yeah. And it took a while for me to learn that she was a feminist. And I'm not a feminist, which you all know.
Because you're smart.
Thank you. So I started working with this therapist because I had chronic pain issues. And I needed to talk to somebody about it. And so I never really got into personal politics. You know, a lot of the stuff that I was talking about was just me coping with how my life looks moving forward, you know, being very ambitious and then being suddenly, you know, inundated with this problem that kept me from reaching my goals. That made me, you know, it put me in a position of like, okay, I should probably talk to somebody and utilize therapy. So I did that. And she was a good therapist and I liked her. She took my insurance. She was available. She was, you know, nearby. So, yeah, so it was convenient. And then after a while, I started to notice that she would like kind of make little comments here and there, you know, that were sort of like negative about men. And, you know, I was very open with her about my views. And then one day she made this very interesting comment to me about the patriarchy. She told me that the patriarchy was responsible for a lot of my problems, which was hilarious because the problem that I was specifically discussing with her was it actually had to do with me beginning streaming. I was on Vice's channel, and I started experiencing some cyberbullying from former friends of mine who were all women. They were all women.
What? Women that are cyberbullying Chandler from my stream, just knock it off.
It was in February, but but anyway.
Knock it off. Still, seriously, knock it off.
It's over and done with. But I brought this into therapy and I talked to her about it, and she said, "Well, when you're a woman in a public-facing role, you know, the fact that we live in a patriarchy means that you're going to get some pushback." And I was just like, but the problem is that there are women who are doing this, and there are men who are defending me and supporting me. So I don't understand what the patriarchy has to do with this. I sat there for a while and I was like,
did she answer that question?
So which question?
Well, did you throw that question at her? Like
I did. I sat there. Well, I kind of asked her. I was like, I sat there really uncomfortable for a while, and I eventually asked her, can you tell me more what you mean about the patriarchy? Like, what can you describe what that is? Can you define that for me? I'd like to understand what the patriarchy means to you and why you think we live in a patriarchy.
Well, I don't know why. I know why anyone would think that, because we live in a world where live streaming, men outstream women by an 8-to-1 ratio.
Well, that's very patriarchal, Joe.
Well, especially
Obviously.
on this channel. Thank you, Joe, for pointing it out.
It's statistically proven right here
right
and now.
Here
that-
it is.
Joe is a statistic.
Chandler is the token female. Thank you. No,
Yeah,
Joe
I
said
love
it.
it. Well, I'm and on my last stream, I was the one person who didn't have a beard, so that was hilarious. I
Well,
felt very.
wait a second. In fairness, I do identify as lesbian.
That's
Right.
true. That's true. You do. You are not. So, well, I wanted to share. You know, she had a very interesting answer to the question when I asked her about the patriarchy. And Joe, I really want to know what you have to say about this in particular. So I asked her, why do you think that there's a patriarchy? What is the patriarchy? And her response was, well, we live in a patriarchy because, first of all, there are lots of men in government. And second of all, just look at what happened with Roe v. Wade recently.
Oh, for fuck's sake.
That's an indication that men are trying to control women's bodies and have control over that. And I was like, okay, but there was legal precedent for that. But like, she's not. So I had to just let it drop. But that was my first indication that this woman was a feminist. She was like, just to be clear, she told me, she was like, I have a degree in women's studies, and that degree has been hanging on my wall this entire time, and I apparently had not looked at it. And so that was that was like the first, you know, the first brick that fell, basically. But
and you didn't bring up
RBG?
RBG? You didn't bring up RBG when she mentioned Roe v. Wade? No, sorry.
I was kind of flabbergasted at the time. I had to collect my thoughts, and I was just like, can I work with a feminist? Can I keep going to therapy when I know my therapist is a feminist? I don't know if I can do that.
Well, aren't they supposed to just listen? Isn't part of it like, what's this lecturing?
Like, you're literally paying people hundreds of dollars an hour just to go, yeah, oh, we sense that you feel pain.
And can I also note
listening.
that,
Thankfully, I never paid her a dime because my insurance covered everything, but I do regret just working with her at all.
well, can I also just note that this is a very California type problem?
Yeah. Well, you mentioned that on YouTube, on Twitter, and people jumped on you.
Oh, yeah. What
do you mean it's California?
Mention what?
The therapy and the feminism.
California therapist, yeah.
Question though, what did you think of Elon's response? Because I thought that was a thoughtful answer, but not quite what was expected. He's obviously not a fan of therapy, and kind of came in saying, "Hey, get a
What did
friend."
he say? What did he say?
I really liked his response. I can pull it up right now. He replied a couple of times. I didn't come prepared. I should have.
He replied. You didn't realize you were going to be. You didn't realize that when you're starstruck that we were just going to sit here trying to bask in your glow and then feel like ourselves as part of our patriarchal duty to strip you of any of your dignity and rightfully earned acclaim and take it for ourselves. You realize that? How is that not clear to you?
No.
And by the way, it's 9-to-1 ratio now. It's 9-to-1.
I have it. If you want me to read it, he replied, and he said. He replied twice. His first reply, he said, "Friends are far better than therapy. The incentive structure is to keep you hooked, never cured. Be especially wary of therapists in expensive neighborhoods. Their true loyalty is to their landlord, not you." So I thanked him for that. And in my, I just said, I appreciate this insight. Thank you, Elon, for your thoughtful reply. So he said, "You're welcome. Friends need to know whether you simply want to feel..."
Cloud chaser.
Wait a second. Did I skip over something? No, yes. He said, "You're welcome. Friends need to know whether you simply want to feel supported or actually to solve a problem. Men often assume the latter, which may entail painful words, so best to tell them explicitly." To which I replied, "This is an important distinction. I think women frequently misunderstand that men are trying to be helpful when they offer solutions. And overall, if women gave men a bit more leeway, there might be better communication between the sexes." So I got a little off topic of therapy there, but, I think that's an important thing to note.
That's a really interesting thing that, what he was saying there in a couple of ways. First and foremost, as a friend, like whenever I have someone unload a problem on me, I will frequently say to them, there's two kinds of friends, and they're both could be really good friends. One is someone who you're looking to vent to them and they're just going to be supportive, and others might give you constructive criticism, which you may not be in the mood to hear. So when you're asking me, when you're unloading on me, just tell me, would you rather that I just support you no matter what, and I can do that, or would you rather that I should try and give you some suggestions that I have that might not sound completely supportive? And in my experience, which I've done this no fewer than 50 times, I'm 50 for 50. They always say, "Give me the constructive criticism," and they never mean it.
I mean, Joe is absolutely correct. Joe is absolutely correct. As men, we have two directives in our life: to provide and fix things. So whenever anyone, woman or man, says, "This is my problem," yada yada yada, we say, "Oh, here's what you need to do to fix that problem," whether or not we were asked. That's just something we do. And so, I get what Joe is saying completely. And by the way, Kurt is the only other guy who has any sense of fashion at all as far as hats are concerned. You all are just degenerates. All the other like baseball cap wearing people.
Yes, that's
Kurt
fair.
is the only other one with any hat sense at all.
That is fair.
Can I, following up on Joe's point, I have a feeling that there's something to that, and it's in the delivery. And where I'm going is, you've heard the term, but behold the underlying truth. So everything said before the but is irrelevant. Everything after the but is what actually sticks. Because you'll say, "Hey, I don't want you to get angry, but," and then you just unload on people or whatever.
Yeah.
Sometimes with the constructive criticism side, Joe, try this. I don't know if it'll work, but just say, blah, 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 blah. But that's so messed up what they did to you. So if you finish it on a "you're so important," or "you're a value," or "hey, hell yeah, you are right," then that's going to be the last message that they hear, and it softens some of the critical aspects that could be hard to face. It's just a random thought.
Being a good listener is an art, and it's difficult. It takes a long time. I had to learn how to listen instead of giving constructive criticism, because I'm actually much more male brain in that regard. Like, I'm more of a fixer. I'm more of a like solution oriented kind of person, and a lot of people don't necessarily like that. So you just kind of have to learn to listen.
Just being a good communicator, period, because it's both the listening aspect and also the talking aspect.
Right.
People, one of the biggest fallacies that always comes up is, "Well, I'm sorry you took it that way." Communication is a two-way street. You actually have to be able to change the language you're using to speak. Otherwise, you're not getting your point across. So it's both. You have to recognize what the person is receiving and how what you are saying is impacting them, and change the dialogue if you need to. And you have to also be listening actively and listen through all the things that are being told to you. So it's both ways.
Yeah. And by the way, I was exaggerating when I said none of them actually mean it. Some of them do mean it, but I will say I'm 50 for 50 that they always claim to want to have constructive criticism. I just haven't found that that's always being completely truthful, because they're just not always ready for it. But at the very least, it insulates you. If you offer that up to someone, at the very least, it insulates you from them getting terribly upset with you for giving them constructive criticism, because you're like, look, I offered, I was willing to be supportive, and I'm still willing to be supportive. You just, you asked me to be constructive, so I'm gonna drop on you some perspective you may not embrace.
I do not want your constructive criticism. I just want your unending praise and validation.
Yeah, I know. And let me tell you something. You are one incredibly beautiful human being, Kurt. You are just fabulous. Everything about you is just amazing, and it's like you're terribly handsome. You're incredibly brilliant, and you're pretty much the smartest human being I've ever met. So.
Well, thank you.
This is pretty good.
Were you going to say something about Kurt?
This is pretty good. I could get used to this. This is fine. I like this. This is good. This works for me.
Nate, you were coming in?
No, I said his pronouns are gorgeous and handsome.
Oh my!
Wow.
So when do you guys going to say something about Kurt?
Please stop. Anytime. Stop.
Did your therapist reply to the tweet or anything on that?
Oh, okay. Yeah. So I discussed this privately with my friends, and I wasn't going to necessarily air it out, but here's what happened. I tweeted that. I had a new session with a new therapist who is actually based and very cool, and was kind of shocked at the experience that I had. He was very offended by her behavior, and he said that it was a reminder to keep his own biases in check moving forward in his profession. So I have a lot of hope for this therapist. I'm hearing feedback. Sorry.
Yeah, where's that from?
Steve.
It's probably MLS Law Show.
No, it's not me.
No, I was kidding. You were the only muted one out of the 10 of us. That's why.
I was being proactive.
My apologies.
We're all hearing voices.
So where was it? Sorry, that distracted me a little bit. So where was I?
Go ahead.
So I had a great session with the new therapist, and then I broke up with my now former therapist. I kind of just sent her an email saying I don't want to work with her anymore.
Yeah.
She wanted to know why.
Who's watching a video about the most popular book of the summer? Who's guilty?
What is the most popular book? She wanted to know why. And so the thing is that The Blaze wrote an article about Elon's response to me. And so I just sent her that as an explanation.
Nice.
She did not reply.
Ouch.
It's funny because you would think a therapist, because isn't that something that they teach you? Because they teach you to try to hold your biases because it's for the client, and you're trying to help them. Instead of imposing your beliefs on them, you're trying to get them to express themselves in a more productive way. So it's I don't want to say she's a bad therapist, but it just seems like
I would go there.
Terrible therapist.
She is, Nate, because that's the one thing I was talking to Chandler like in real time while this was happening. I'm like, what are you doing? You woke up this morning and you had 5 million people watching your tweet, and her therapist was doing F all.
It's I'll say it. I'll tell you right now. One of the things that we always hear about is that we need more mental health. It's all about lack of mental health. All these shootings, lack of mental health, and that we just we need to spend more money on mental health, which is. No one wants to see shootings. I don't want to see anyone dying. Who the heck, especially kids? It's terrible. It's really terrible. And I agree that there's a big problem with mental health. I just think that our mental health professionals, too many of them, contribute to the problems with mental health rather than curing them.
Well, they do.
They're too many of them are agenda driven. Not all of them. I'm not looking to cascade the entire profession, but I think that the messaging from the top is very agenda driven. There's been a radical shift in how they approach mental health issues. And instead of recognizing that, hey, 15 years after we brought in DSM-5, our society today is more miserable, more angry, and less satisfied with their own lives than ever before, perhaps in human history, despite having more wealth and access to mental health professionals. I mean, how can you not find them? You walk outside, if you get mugged, it's probably by some mental health professional as well. Everyone's doing mental health.
But Joe, why is that?
There's so
why
much.
Do we feel that way, Joe?
I'm simply saying that I think that some of the new directions that our mental health profession has taken has literally made society a much worse place to live. So spending more money on mental health is not the answer if it's just feeding more gasoline rather than actually helping people find the genuine tonic to their lives. So sometimes people who are seeking mental health, instead of being coddled and being enabled, they actually need constructive criticism, delivered tenderly, deliver with respect, and an understanding that, this is a person who's struggling and suffering with whatever particular issues that they have, but not to say, yeah, you're right, everyone else is wrong. And that you don't need to correct anything, because that's I think what I feel is happening far too often with people who have genuine issues, that their issues just become more entrenched and far worse, rather than actually saying, hey, you know what, maybe there's other ways of looking at your problems so you can deal with this and face up to your problems and recognize that these challenges are not something that should be destroying your life, but rather are a chance for you to enrich yourself and grow beyond who you were before you came across these problems.
There's a new TV show with Harrison Ford. It plays a therapist. And the idea of the show, I only watched the first couple of episodes this far, but he's mentoring another therapist. And this therapist goes off the deep end by telling clients and patients exactly what he thinks and exactly what they should do. And it's yielding positive results, but he has to hide it because that's the wrong thing. That's the wrong thing to do. It's a TV show about therapists, and I can't remember the name of it. But that's the wrong thing to do, apparently.
Well, what Joe's saying, Joe's saying there, and I want to echo what he's saying, and that is, there is something to be said for, self-worth and feeling better about yourself, but there's also something about looking at yourself in the mirror and bettering yourself gradually day by day, and addressing, like, nobody's perfect, and we all know areas in which we can improve our lives and improve ourselves, and looked at making a self-assessment and working on our own flaws and not blaming the world for what we are. And
locus of control.
A lot of validation.
One caveat there is that we're constantly being reminded every single day that the world imposes circumstances on us. We never actually own our own existence.
We should
constant reminders that we face where the world is hard. It's going to be difficult. You smash your head against a brick, and at some point in time, you can break through that brick wall. If you just
already done that.
Just why does the world have to be this thing that is forcing itself on you? Why can't you go out there, live your life, and live the best life without
exactly?
I want to go back to what Joe was saying for a second.
Hold on, let Chandler jump in here.
Oh, I mean, no, go ahead. Who else wanted to contribute?
No, I was just saying, do I want? I don't mind. Yes, mental health it's become this monster, right? We don't know if it's the mental. If now it's like one of those things where you don't know you have a problem, but then you go and you find out you have a whole bunch of problems, right? Because everybody's more cognizant of it. But I do think we don't want to throw out the good for the perfect. For instance, mental health 50 years ago was that just go outside and be a man and take care of it, and then that person would go crazy and do all this stuff. Versus now, let's talk about our problems. So I do think
preach, Nicholas the lawyer, preach, Nate, preach, Nate.
I do think that it's not perfect, but I do think identifying that, like for instance, and here in New York. Most of the things that happen on the train, well, here in New York, I'm in Texas, but in New York, most of those things that happen on the train, like with Daniel Penny, those are people with serious mental health issues. And I think you're right. They're not being helped by the system because that system is designed to help them. But I still don't think that we shouldn't strive to be better or to try to have a better system because we've identified these are problems that people have. But I think like the experience that Chandler has, it may be indicative of that particular therapist, but I don't think it's the problem of all therapy and all therapy should be thrown out because of this one problem. Because there's decades and decades and decades of science. I have a psychology degree and of science that shows that yes, more people are helped by just identifying that you do have a problem than are not.
I think about this, with all the shootings you have there, which anyone who commits a mass murder or attempts a mass murder is obviously someone who has serious mental health issues. Right. How many of them do you think never got any mental health help at all? I would venture to say probably zero. Yeah. Zero failed to seek out some level of mental health, or at least if not seek it out.
James Holmes working with a therapist. The Aurora shooter, the one who shot up the movie theater, he was working with a therapist at the time of the shooting, right before.
SSRIs. Look that up. There are some very scary correlations. I'm not going to say it's causal, but there are strong correlations with SSRIs and mass shooters.
Absolutely. Just like with ice cream and shark attacks, right? There's strong correlations, but that doesn't mean one causes the other.
Correct.
Well, I'm going to go a little bit more into detail. I wanted to reply to what Joe was saying before, which I thought was really insightful. The fact of the matter is, so like I talked a little bit about my experience in therapy. I didn't really talk about the reason that I left the therapist. It became clear to me over time that she was very enabling. And I'm not saying that she wasn't supportive. She was very supportive. And she helped with certain things. She was very enabling to the degree where I would bring in something and I would acknowledge I did this thing and I messed up and I need to take accountability for it. And she would say, no, but you're young and now is the time to make mistakes in your life. And I was like, no, I'm an adult and I'm taking responsibility for this. And I want to reflect on the choice that I made, and moving forward, I want to make different choices. She was very enabling. And it became clear to me that her whole style was, to affirm and to coddle, and that is not what I want personally.
And here's the thing, if you think about it, if you're a mental health professional and you're looking to build and expand your business, so if you're someone who's always the voice of you're right, everyone else is wrong, that encourages people to keep coming back to you, even if they're not getting mental health, because because when they're in your zone, they feel good, and they almost never feel good. They have their mental health issues. They almost never feel good, but they know when they come to you, they feel good, but they're not feeling good for the right reasons. They're feeling good because you're just sitting there as that friend that they don't have, who's just saying, you're perfect, you're beautiful, you're the most masculine human being, Kurt, I've ever seen before.
Which is exactly what Elon Musk was saying, though. He was saying, like, you know, watch out for these therapists who are like, they are going to try and create that circumstance for you so you keep coming back. And, you know, this... Sorry.
No, I'm sorry for interrupting you. I was just going to say that, you know, that there is, like, all these things are in balance. Like, I don't think that necessarily what your psychiatrist was doing is fundamentally wrong, because that can be at least what they're trying to aim for, maybe. Because the idea that people don't love themselves enough and people don't have enough self-love, like, I think is something, because I tend to be hard on myself, and people will be, sometimes in chat will even say things like, you know, we wish you loved yourself the way we love you because you're too hard on yourself. So there's some role to be had for people not having enough confidence or not enough security in themselves. So
sure, but you have to get to know your patient, and you know, specifically what that patient needs. And I mean that what I needed in particular was not to be coddled. Like, I came in, she tried to create this circumstance where she identified me as a victim of something that was complete bullshit. Like, you know, she tried to frame things like, you know, you are a victim of something, and I did not feel that way. And I feel like that's a huge problem.
Well, but there's another
that mindset
Elon made in his response to you that I think is a very important point, and that is the value of friendship. And that's something that we've gotten so lonely in the society, and everything's gotten through this little phone, and our societal breakdown, you know, the men versus women, and men against men, women against women, breaking people up into little isolated, lonely people. And we really need to work on being, you know, developing our friendships. But, you know, the way we develop our friendships is by being better friends and learning how to be a friend to others, and reaching out and doing something good for others that doesn't gain us anything, but being good to somebody because you can, and it makes that person happy. And, you know, and through that, by learning to be a good friend, we will gain friends. And I think that this is something that our lonely society really needs some work on, is developed, because friends, you know, you're paying somebody for sometimes giving you what you don't have otherwise. So perhaps the better result would be to invest in being a better friend.
I agree.
You know, I like the song lyrics from Jason Aldean's new song.
Oh, my God, that's we should talk about that next. But I do want to say this. I think therapy, unfortunately, it's become woke in a sense, and I think Chandler, as a woman, has experienced the same thing I've experienced as a Black male going to therapy. Because so when I went to therapy, it wasn't because my problems weren't because I made mistakes. It was because of society hates Black men. And struggled was holding me back. I was being held back as a Black man, and you know, it wasn't really my fault that I didn't get the job I wanted. It wasn't my fault that I didn't do this, or it wasn't my fault. And it was kind of a way to try to help me understand that, hey, I can do more, but you know, it's like you're being held back. And at a point, I had to say, like, no, this is ridiculous, right? The reason why I didn't do well on that test is because I didn't study for it. The reason why I didn't get that job is because I wasn't the best candidate. And when I kind of pushed back on the person was like, yeah, I understand that, but you understand that there's a whole structure here that you're kind of fighting against as a Black man. But I'm thinking it's because the therapists are coming from those same woke institutions that we all realize.
Where do they learn?
Those same colleges, those same things, and they're learning that there and coming out to the real world and trying to help people by saying, hey, this is not your fault. You know, you are, because of who you are is the reason why these things are happening to you, not because of what you do. And that's the part where I think therapy needs to change. And I think that's what happened to Chandler. It was because of who you are, and there's really nothing you can do about that. So we'll help you try to fight against that. But now I'll also say is that when I did move from that therapist to essentially a white guy, and you know what that white guy said? He essentially told me, it's like, be a man. Like it wasn't be a man, but it was essentially that. And that woke me up. And it woke me up to the point where I went, and there was no more excuses. I went and did what I had to do. That's why I was able to become a college professor, do all this other shit. It's because nothing was holding me. I found out that the fact that I was Black and selling and using that as an excuse of why I wasn't being successful was the actual fact why I was being held back. And I think that's what we're trying to prevent, is that these therapists from holding us back because of who we are and helping us become who we want to be, not because of I'm black. It's because I need to improve these things myself. And I think that's what Chandler's experienced, and that's what I experienced. But that may be different for you white guys, but it's not.
So wait, what? You just figured out you were black? You just figured that out?
Nate, I think that
I could have told you that like a while ago, Nate.
I think it's universal. And again, I said it earlier, I don't know if anybody heard, but the locus of control. I really believe this in my heart and soul, because let's take the worst case scenario. Yes, the whole system's rigged against you. Okay, what can you do? The system's rigged. How can you interact with the system in a different way in order to get the system to work for you? You can't control other people. You can only control yourself.
And that's
it could be wrong, it could be evil, it could be anything else, but how you interact with the world or how you choose to react or whatever, that's the only possible thing that you can control.
Healthy therapy. That's what I was just thinking.
I played dead.
They were missing the point with Chandler and Nate's therapist as examples. They're missing the point of what they're trying to do.
Yeah, healthy therapy should be designed to help you swim in the very challenging environment that we call life, and whatever society that you're in, Joe. And teaching you how to navigate through that, rather than telling you the environment that you're in is wrong and it's their fault, and that's why you're having all these problems, because it's such a defeatist attitude. You're basically telling people that they're helpless. This is part of I've said a year ago that everyone complaining about CRT and these parents going out there. It's not the damaging effects of telling people that we live in a prejudiced society or all this, and that the system is so fatally flawed that it could never be corrected unless it's ripped down, is not as damaging, and that's all white people's fault. That's not as damaging to a white kid as it is to a minority kid. It's far more damaging to the minority kid, because you're basically telling them that you're helpless and that you're light and that society is rigged against you, and that your voice and what happens is you're teaching them that either they cannot win or they necessarily should be valued irrespective of a lack of development of their own ability to achieve, because, well, we need to raise you up because of the fact that you're black or because you're gay or because you're a woman or whatever minority they decide to focus on. That's where your value lies in. It lies in your intersectionality rather than any merit that you actually achieve or any effort you put in. It lies in your intersectionality, and it has to lie in that, because you can never achieve, because you can never attain merit, because the system is so deeply flawed and so deeply rigged against you. It is so terribly damaging to a kid to hear this, that you're almost making it impossible for them to succeed. And we keep delivering this message over and over again, and then we have so much misery, and of course it's causing misery to some white kid who feels like, oh my god, I don't want to be an oppressor. So it's literally causing misery to everyone involved, and the people it's designed to help are the people who it hurts more than anyone else.
You're absolutely right. I mean, this is what I was indoctrinated with in my liberal college. They called it the myth of meritocracy, which is the idea. So the myth of meritocracy was something that I was taught. It's basically, there is this myth that if you just pull yourself up by your bootstraps that you can achieve in life, but that's not true, because if you're black or brown or gay or disabled, you can't. I mean, that's what I was taught literally in college, and I believed this. But the thing is that I never really bought into it, because I always just thought, well, if the system is rigged against me as a woman, then I'm just going to ignore that and continue to push forward, because I'm not going to be a victim of anything.